The desert wind howled across the empty plains, carrying with it whispers of forgotten times and the echoes of men who once carved their names into the dust of the frontier. On the edge of those endless sands stood a weathered ranch, built by strong hands long ago. But now only one man remained to guard it, Ethan Cole, the lone rancher, and his eyes bore the story of a man who had lived with more memories than conversations. The ranch was his world, its wooden fences, its creaking barn, the lonely corral, and the house that echoed with nothing but silence. Each day began the same: sunrise over the jagged hills, chores to keep the land alive, and nights filled with the crackling of a dying fire. Ethan was a man hardened by solitude, but beneath that rough exterior, a piece of him yearned for something more: companionship, purpose, perhaps even redemption for the battles of his past that still haunted his sleep. He had long accepted that nothing new would come walking through the dusty gates of his ranch, but fate has a way of breaking through when least expected. On a day when the sky glowed harsh and the wind carried a storm of sand, Ethan heard something unusual: soft footsteps, voices not belonging to the desert. He opened the old wooden gate, and what he saw stole the breath from his lungs. 6 young women, dressed in plain desert robes, knelt in the dirt before him as though brought by some higher power. Ethan, for the first time in years, felt the stillness of his ranch crack like a dam breaking. The women did not answer at first, only bowed lower, their hair catching the sunlight like strands of fire against the dust. The silence of his lonely ranch was about to be replaced with a storm louder than any thunder, and destiny had just stepped across his gates. Ethan's hand rested on the wooden gate, his shadow stretching across the sand as the 6 women remained kneeling, their breaths uneven, their eyes shimmering with both exhaustion and a strange determination. For it had been so long since he had seen faces other than his own in the reflection of water troughs. Yet the sound of their breaths, the dust clinging to their garments, and the faint tremble in their limbs told him they were as real as the calluses on his palms. He cleared his throat, the deep voice echoing like thunder in the quiet ranch. "Stand up, if you can. The ground will only take more from you." Slowly, one by one, they rose. Ethan's sharp eyes caught the details: their clothes torn by travel. He pushed the gate wide open, motioning them inside the ranch. Suspicion still lingered in his mind. Strangers at the edge of the desert rarely carried good fortune. Yet something in their eyes struck him: not deceit, not greed, but desperation wrapped in hope. Without another word, he led them to the well, lowering the old wooden bucket, pulling it up with steady strength, and handing it over. They drank as though tasting life itself, water spilling down their faces as they tried to quench the thirst that had nearly broken them. For the first time in years, Ethan watched another soul drink from his well, and the silence that had clung to his home seemed to retreat. As they caught their breaths, one of the women finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "We've come a long way, searching for safety." Her words carried weight, but she said no more. Ethan's brow furrowed. Safety from what? The frontier was filled with dangers: outlaws, mercenaries, men who hunted the helpless like wolves. He did not press, not yet. Instead, he led them toward the barn, where hay and shade offered some relief from the scorching sun. As the women settled, Ethan leaned against the wooden beam, arms crossed, trying to understand why fate had brought them to his forgotten land. He was a man who had asked for nothing and expected nothing. Yet here were 6 lives placed at his doorstep, kneeling as if destiny itself had chosen him. A fire stirred within his chest, a feeling he had not known in years. The ranch that had once been a grave of silence had become, in a single day, a sanctuary of unanswered questions. The barn carried the scent of hay, wood, and old leather, a scent Ethan had grown so accustomed to that he no longer noticed. Yet when the 6 women entered, their eyes softened as if the simple shelter felt like salvation. Ethan stood near the doorway, his figure outlined by the golden light of the setting sun, his mind caught between suspicion and curiosity. He had been alone for so long that the sound of their whispers, the soft rustle of their robes, felt almost foreign, like music from a world he had long forgotten. Finally, as the women caught their breath and sat in a circle upon the hay, Ethan spoke again, his tone steady but demanding. "I've given you water and a roof for now, but if you're running from something, I need to know what. Trouble has no place here. Silence fell for a heartbeat, the only sound the creak of wood in the rafters above. Then, the same woman who had spoken before raised her eyes to him. Her voice trembled, but her words held truth. We escaped. Men who would have sold us. Men who hunt the helpless. We ran until the desert nearly swallowed us. And this ranch, it was the only place left standing. Ethan's jaw tightened, memories of his own battles flashing like ghosts in his mind. He had fought men like that before, years ago, when the frontier was wilder, and he still believed in fighting for justice. Now he had sworn off conflict, choosing silence over bloodshed. Yet looking at the 6 women, bruised by hardship yet refusing to surrender, something inside him stirred again. He stepped further into the barn, the floorboards groaning beneath his boots, and spoke with a calm strength. If you've come here for safety, then know this: while you are under my roof, no man will harm you. But understand, safety comes with work. The desert shows no mercy, and neither does this ranch. If you wish to stay, you will stand beside me in its labor. A spark lit in their eyes, hope mixed with gratitude, and one by one, they nodded in agreement. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a weight lift from his chest. His ranch, once a place of solitude and silence, had become a refuge, and perhaps, just perhaps, a place of rebirth. Outside, the desert winds began to calm, as if the land itself acknowledged the beginning of a new chapter. Ethan turned his gaze to the horizon, his heart heavy with the knowledge that men as cruel as the ones these women fled would not stop searching. Trouble was coming. He could feel it, but this time, he would not face it as a man alone. Night settled slowly over the ranch, the desert sky painted with 1,000 stars that shimmered like watchful eyes. Ethan lit the lanterns in the main cabin, their glow casting long shadows across the wooden walls that had for years known only silence. Now, that silence was broken by the presence of 6 women, who sat close together near the fire, their faces still weary, but softened by the comfort of warmth and shelter. Ethan sat apart, leaning against his old wooden chair, his head tilted low, studying them quietly. He had questions, many of them, but he also knew the weight of fear, and he recognized it in their cautious glances. Trust would not be built in a single night. For a while, only the crackle of the fire spoke. Finally, one of the younger women, her voice barely above a whisper, said, "We thought we would die out there." Her words hung in the air like smoke, and Ethan raised his gaze, meeting her eyes with a steady calm. "But you didn't," he replied firmly, "because you kept moving forward. That kind of strength doesn't come easy." His words seemed to plant something in their hearts, for a faint spark of courage showed on their faces. He told them where they could sleep, rolling out spare blankets he hadn't used in years. As the women settled, Ethan stepped outside, the night air sharp with desert chill. He looked out across the dark horizon, listening to the cries of coyotes and the rustle of wind over the sand. Something deep inside him stirred uneasily. Men like the ones the women had fled did not give up their prey. Trouble was out there, moving closer with every hour. Ethan clenched his fists, his weathered hands remembering the weight of a rifle, the recoil of justice once dealt. He had sworn to put down that life, to live in peace on this ranch, but the past had a way of clawing its way back. Still, asleep but safe, he knew a choice had already been made in his heart. The ranch was no longer just his sanctuary, it was theirs too. And if danger came riding through the desert, he would meet it head-on. Not for himself this time, but for them. For the first time in years, Ethan felt alive again, not because of solitude, but because destiny had given him something worth protecting. The following morning, the desert woke with a fierce heat, the kind that made the horizon shimmer like waves on the sea. Ethan rose before dawn, as he always did, feeding the horses, checking the fences, and walking the land that had been his only companion for years. But now, when he returned to the ranch house, the sound of laughter, soft, uncertain, but real, floated through the air. The 6 women were gathered by the water trough, washing the dust from their faces, their robes hanging loose as the morning sun caught in their hair. Ethan stopped for a moment, watching silently, realizing how long it had been since such a sound had graced his home. Yet his heart did not soften completely, for danger still shadowed his thoughts. "If you're to stay here," he said firmly, "you'll need to learn the work this land demands. The desert doesn't forgive idleness." The women nodded, some hesitantly, some with determination, and soon the ranch, once quiet and still, came alive with movement, fetching water, tending animals, sweeping dust from the floors that hadn't seen care in years. Watching them work beside him, Ethan felt the loneliness that had weighed on him like a stone begin to crack, though he kept his expression steady. Yet as the sun climbed higher, a shift in the wind caught his attention. From the ridge beyond the ranch, faint dust rose into the air, the kind that came not from storms but from riders. Ethan's instincts sharpened. He knew that trail, knew the way men rode when they hunted. His jaw tightened as he set down the bucket he was carrying. Trouble was coming faster than he had expected. He did not speak of it to the women yet, not wanting to break the fragile peace they had found in his home. But his eyes kept straying to the horizon, his hand brushing the rifle leaning against the porch, as old habits stirred like fire in his blood, shadows moving in patterns too deliberate to be coincidence. Ethan sat on the porch as the sky bled into twilight, his rifle across his knees, the weight of choice heavy in his chest. And now, as danger crept nearer with each passing hour, Ethan Cole knew the desert would soon test whether he could still fight like the man he once was. Twilight wrapped the desert in a cloak of deepening shadows, and Ethan's sharp eyes never left the horizon. The 6 women, though weary from their work, had begun to sense the unease in his silence, the way his gaze lingered too long on the distance, the way his hands never strayed far from the rifle resting across his knees. They whispered among themselves, their voices low and uncertain, but Ethan did not answer their questions. Instead, he listened to the desert itself. He had lived long enough out here to know the difference between the casual passing of travelers and the deliberate advance of men with purpose. These riders were closing in, and he had no doubt who they were. As the stars began to scatter across the sky, Ethan stood, his boots creaking on the porch, and finally addressed the women. "You need to understand something," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Those men you ran from, they're hunting you, and if they find this place, they won't leave it standing." His words drew a gasp from the youngest, while the eldest lowered her gaze, as though she had expected this moment all along. Ethan continued, his eyes hard as steel. "Fear won't help you now." The women exchanged anxious glances, some clutching their hands together, others straightening as if summoning courage. Ethan felt a strange pride stirring inside him, though they were frightened. None begged to leave, none turned away. That meant something. He walked them through the cabin, showing them where to bar the doors, where to keep low if bullets flew, where to find the old cellar if the fight grew too fierce. His movements were precise, his instructions clear, like a man who had fought battles before and lived to remember every lesson. The firelight flickered across his face, sharpening the lines of a warrior hidden beneath the mask of a rancher. In the far distance, faint torches now glowed like red stars crawling closer through the dark. Ethan's grip on his rifle tightened. The storm he had feared was no longer approaching, it was here. The silence of his ranch was broken forever, and in that moment, Ethan Cole accepted his fate. The time for solitude had ended. The time for battle had come.